The wind that November morning carried the kind of cold that didn't just bite. It lingered. It rattled the windows of the Highway 8 diner like it was trying to get in, like it had something personal against the people sitting warm inside. This place had been standing for 34 years, long enough to see 3 generations of truckers, farmers, and broken-down travelers pass through its doors. The red vinyl booths were cracked in places where the foam pushed through like old scars. The counter had absorbed so many coffee rings and quiet confessions that it had become a kind of archive of small-town grief. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that sickly pale glow that makes 4 in the morning look even lonelier than it already is. Emma Cross sat in the corner booth farthest from the door, back against the wall, because old habits don't die just because your body changes. She was 32 years old, though people usually guessed younger because of the way she carried herself. Careful, measured, like someone who'd learned that the world could turn violent without warning. Auburn hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and her green eyes held the kind of stillness you only see in people who have survived something that most folks only whisper about. She wore dark jeans and a gray sweater, clothes designed to help her disappear. Her crutches leaned against the booth beside her, medical-grade aluminum with padded grips worn smooth from years of use. Beneath the table, hidden from casual view, her left leg ended just below the knee. The prosthetic was advanced, custom-made, engineered with the kind of precision that cost more than most people's cars. But no amount of engineering could erase the phantom sensations, the ghost limb that still ached on rainy days, the memory of wholeness that her brain refused to let go. Emma had built something massive from that hospital bed. 5 years ago, after the accident that took her leg and nearly took her will to live, she'd started sketching designs on notebook paper while learning to walk again. Now she ran a company worth just over $4 billion, adaptive technology, AI-driven prosthetics, accessibility devices that helped thousands of people navigate a world that wasn't built for them. She'd done it fueled by a fury that still burned hot, a refusal to be defined by what she'd lost. But this morning, sitting in the Highway 8 diner with her scrambled eggs going cold and her strawberry milkshake sweating on the table, she wasn't a billionaire. She was just a woman trying to steal 15 minutes of peace before the day swallowed her whole. The diner held maybe a dozen other people scattered across its worn booths and counter stools. An elderly couple near the window, holding hands like they were still young. A truck driver reading yesterday's sports section. A woman in scrubs who looked like she'd just finished a double shift at the county hospital. And at the counter, hunched over black coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago, sat a man named Jake Morrison. Jake was 34, though the lines around his eyes suggested someone who'd lived a decade longer. Dark hair, slightly too long. Stubble that told you he'd left the house in a hurry. Work boots caked with grease and brake dust. His denim jacket had seen better days, and the flannel beneath it was wrinkled from being pulled straight out of the dryer. Broad shoulders from years of physical labor. Hands that knew their way around an engine better than most surgeons knew human anatomy. Those hands trembled slightly now as they wrapped around the coffee mug, a tremor he tried to hide by gripping tighter. Jake had been awake for 27 hours straight. A customer's transmission had decided to die at 8 the previous night, and he'd promised the elderly woman she could have her car back by morning because she needed it to get to her dialysis appointment. So he'd worked through the night at Morrison's Auto Repair, the 3-bay garage his father had built 42 years ago. The garage Jake had inherited 3 years back, along with a mountain of debt and the weight of a legacy that sat on shoulders already carrying too much. The nightmares had been worse lately. Flashes of sand and blood, faces of men who weren't coming home. 11 years as a Marine raider had carved something permanent into his nervous system, reflexes that didn't always fit civilian life, a left knee that screamed when the barometric pressure dropped, and a right shoulder held together by scar tissue and stubbornness. Medical discharge at 31 after an IED had torn through his vehicle leaving him alive but fractured in ways the doctors couldn't quite fix. The VA had given him pills and a therapist's phone number. He'd taken neither. Instead, he'd come home to Jackson County, to the garage his father had loved more than anything, more than his own health. Leo Donovan, the 67-year-old mechanic who'd worked beside Jake's father for 35 years, had handed Jake the keys with tears in his eyes and a warning on his lips. "The bank's circling, son. Your old man died owing them more than this place is worth." Now Jake had 63 days before foreclosure. 63 days to somehow come up with $210,000 or watch his father's legacy get auctioned off to the highest bidder. The thought sat in his chest like a piece of shrapnel, heavy and cold, making it hard to breathe. He stopped at the diner because going home meant facing his daughter's questions, and he didn't have answers that wouldn't scare a 9-year-old. Better to sit here in the pre-dawn quiet, pretending the world still made sense, pretending he wasn't drowning. That's when the two boys walked in. Teenagers, maybe 16 or 17, wearing varsity jackets from Jackson County High School. Crimson and silver colors that looked garish in the diner's muted light. The taller one had dirty blonde hair styled with too much product. His buddy was stockier, with mean eyes that moved constantly, scanning for targets. They ordered nothing, just occupied a table near the door, scrolling through their phones and laughing at something Jake couldn't hear. He noticed them, noticed Emma, saw the sideways glances, the whispered comments, the particular quality of attention that disabled bodies attract from people who have never had to question their own wholeness. Jake's hands tightened on the coffee mug. He should ignore it, should mind his own business, should stay in his lane like he'd been doing for 3 years, keeping his head down, avoiding confrontation, trying to be the kind of father a 9-year-old girl needed. The blonde one spoke loud enough to carry across the diner. "Dude, check it out, in the corner." The word landed like a rock through a window. Several diners looked up, then quickly away. That universal human instinct to avoid confrontation, to pretend not to hear, to let someone else's cruelty pass by unacknowledged. Jake felt his jaw clench, felt the old training kick in, the raider awareness that cataloged exits, threats, vulnerable points without conscious thought. He forced himself to stay seated. Not your problem, he told himself. Not your fight. Think she was born like that, or messed herself up somehow? The stockier kid's laugh was harsh, ugly. "Who cares, man? Probably can't even walk right." Jake watched Emma's hand tighten around her milkshake glass, watched her jaw set in a way that suggested she'd heard worse, survived worse, built armor around herself layer by careful layer. She didn't look up, didn't engage, just sat there absorbing the cruelty like she'd learned that engaging only feeds it. Carol, the middle-aged waitress who'd served Jake his coffee without comment, hovered near the kitchen pass with a tight face and frozen feet. Even she wouldn't intervene. No one would. Jake had seen this dance before in 100 different contexts. The strong prey on the weak, and everyone else looks away, grateful it isn't them, ashamed of their own cowardice, but not ashamed enough to act. The blonde kid stood up. Instead of leaving, he and his buddy walked directly toward Emma's table. Jake's pulse quickened. His hands had stopped trembling. The tremor that came from exhaustion and stress and too much caffeine had been replaced by something else entirely, something cold and focused that his therapist would have called hypervigilance and his team leader would have called operational readiness. He watched the boys stop beside Emma's booth, watched them loom over her with the casual cruelty of people who'd never faced real consequences. "Hey," the blonde one's smile was sharp, empty. "Those are some sick crutches. You like in an accident or something." Emma looked up, her expression carefully neutral. "Excuse me." "I asked if you were in an accident," slower now as if speaking to a child. "You know." "Like how'd you mess up your leg?" his friend snickered. Jake's coffee mug hit the counter harder than he'd intended. The ceramic clinked against the formica. Several people looked his way. He didn't notice. His entire focus had narrowed to the scene unfolding 15 feet away, to the disabled woman being harassed by children who thought cruelty was entertainment. "That's none of your business," Emma said quietly, firmly. "Please leave me alone." The blonde one's smile widened. "Whoa, touchy, just trying to be friendly." "Doesn't seem very friendly to me." Her voice stayed steady despite what Jake could now recognize as adrenaline flooding her system, the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers had gone white-knuckled on the table edge. "I'm asking you politely to walk away." For a moment, Jake thought they might actually listen. Then the stockier kid reached out and picked up one of Emma's crutches, examining it like a toy he'd found on the playground. "These things are kind of cool, actually. How much weight can they hold? Like, could a normal person use them, or are they, special equipment?" The slur hung in the air. Jake was already standing. His body moved before his brain had fully processed the decision. 11 years of training, 11 years of responding to threats, 11 years of being the one who stood between danger and the people who couldn't defend themselves. It didn't matter that he was stateside. Didn't matter that these were kids and not enemy combatants. Didn't matter that he'd been telling himself for 3 years to stay quiet and invisible and out of trouble. "Put that down," Emma said, her voice low and dangerous. "Right now." Instead, the boy swung the crutch experimentally, nearly hitting the adjacent booth. "Or what?" he challenged, eyes bright with the particular cruelty of someone who'd never faced consequences. "You gonna chase me?" His friend burst out laughing. And that's when it happened. The blonde kid, still laughing, reached across the table and with a sudden, vicious flick of his wrist knocked Emma's milkshake directly off the surface. The glass tumbled through the air in what felt like slow motion. It hit the tile floor and exploded, shards scattering across the checkered pattern like fractured ice, pink liquid spreading in a widening pool. The entire diner went absolutely silent. Even Jake, halfway across the room now, froze for a heartbeat. Not because of the broken glass or the spilled drink, but because of what it represented. The deliberateness of it. The casual cruelty of humiliating a stranger simply because they could. The public nature of the attack, done in front of witnesses who would do nothing, say nothing, pretend they hadn't seen. Carol stood frozen behind the counter. The elderly couple looked horrified but didn't move. The truck driver had set down his newspaper but remained seated. And the boys were laughing even harder now, feeding off each other's energy, drunk on the power of having an audience that wouldn't stop them. "Oops," the blonde one said, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. "My bad, guess you'll need someone to clean that up. Oh, wait," he gestured at Emma's leg. "Probably hard for you to get down there, huh?" Then he slapped her. The sound echoed through the diner like a gunshot. His palm connected with Emma's left cheek with enough force to snap her head to the side, enough force to leave a red mark blooming across her face, enough force to make Jake's vision go white at the edges. He didn't remember crossing the remaining distance, didn't remember the moment his training took over, completely overriding the careful civilian restraint he'd been practicing for 3 years, didn't remember deciding to act. He just moved. The blonde kid was still turning away from Emma, still smiling at his own cruelty, when Jake's hand locked around his wrist. The kid had maybe a second to register surprise before Jake twisted, using the boy's own momentum against him, applying just enough pressure to the nerve cluster to drop him to his knees without breaking anything. A textbook control hold, the kind they drilled 1,000 times in close-quarters combat training. The second kid lunged forward, some dim instinct to help his friend, but Jake was already moving. His left hand shot out, catching the stockier kid's jacket, using his forward momentum to redirect him into the nearest booth. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to make the point. Hard enough to take the fight out of him before it started. Both boys were on the ground now, one clutching his wrist, the other tangled in a booth, and Jake was standing over them with his heart hammering and his hands steady, and the old familiar feeling of being exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was trained to do. Then the world came rushing back. The diner was still silent, but now every single person was staring at him. Not at the boys, at Jake. And the expressions on their faces weren't relief or gratitude. They were fear. He'd moved too fast, too efficiently, too violently. He'd controlled the situation with military precision. And now these civilians were looking at him like he was the threat. His hands started to shake. Not the caffeine tremor from before, but something deeper, something that came from the sudden flood of adrenaline draining away and taking all certainty with it. What had he done? He just assaulted two minors in a public restaurant. Didn't matter that they'd hit someone first. Didn't matter that he'd been trying to help. He'd used force, and everyone had seen it. And now they were all looking at him like he was a bomb waiting to go off. "You," he managed to say it, his voice rougher than he'd intended. The blond kid was still on his knees, cradling his wrist. "What's your name?" The kid blinked, caught off guard. Who the hell are you?" "I'm someone who just watched you assault a woman." Jake's training kicked in again. Different training this time. The de-escalation protocols they'd learned for dealing with civilians in hostile territory. "So I'm going to ask you again. What's your name?" The boys exchanged glances, trying to decide whether to run or fight or laugh it off. "This isn't your business, old man," the stockier one said, though uncertainty was creeping into his voice. Jake didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't make threats. He just stood there, a wall of quiet determination, and said, "You made it everyone's business when you did it in front of all these people. Now you've got two choices. You can tell me your name and we can sort this out like human beings, or I can call the police and let them sort it out. Your call." The diner seemed to hold its breath again, but this time it was different. Carol had her phone out ready. The elderly couple was watching intently now. Even the truck driver had stood up. Witnesses suddenly everywhere. Witnesses willing to see. "Look, man," the blonde kid's face had gone pale. "We were just messing around." "You hit her." Jake's voice dropped even lower, even more dangerous. "You knocked her property to the ground, humiliated her in public, and then you struck her across the face. That's assault and battery. So let me be very clear. Your time for messing around just ended." Throughout this exchange, Emma had remained absolutely still, one hand pressed to her reddening cheek, watching this stranger defend her with an intensity that suggested he'd done this before. Trained for this. Lived this. Jake could feel her eyes on him, but he didn't look her way. Couldn't afford to break his focus on the two boys who were now backing toward the door, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. "We didn't mean," the stockier one started. "Stop," Jake interrupted. "Don't insult everyone's intelligence by pretending this was an accident. You meant every second of it. You enjoyed it. And if I hadn't stood up, you'd be walking out that door right now thinking you could do it again to someone else." He pulled out his phone. "So hear what happens next. You're going to apologize, sincerely, looking her in the eye. Then you're going to give me your names and your parents' phone numbers. And then you're going to leave. If you refuse any of these things, I make one call and you can explain all this to the police. Choose now." The silence stretched. Jake found himself barely breathing, watching these teenage boys who moments ago had seemed so powerful, so invincible, transform into frightened children under the weight of actual consequences. Part of him, the part that had spent too many nights dreaming of sand and blood, wanted them to refuse. Wanted the excuse to make that call, to see them face real punishment for their cruelty. But the bigger part of him, the part that had a daughter waiting at home, just wanted this to be over. "I'm sorry," the blonde one mumbled, looking somewhere past Emma's shoulder. "No," Jake's voice was firm. "Look at her, say it like you mean it." This time the boy's eyes met Emma, and Jake saw genuine fear there. Not of her, but of what might happen next, of having his parents called, of facing real consequences. "I'm sorry," he said again, and his voice cracked. "We shouldn't have done that. I'm really sorry." His friend echoed the apology, stumbling over the words. Jake nodded once. Names and numbers now. Reluctantly, shamefacedly, the boys complied. Jake entered the information into his phone with methodical precision, double-checking every digit. "If I hear about either of you pulling something like this again," he said, "I won't call your parents. I'll call the police directly and I'll press charges myself as a witness. Are we clear?" They nodded frantically. "Get out of here." The boys fled, actually fled, nearly tripping over each other in their haste to escape through the front door. The small bell above it chimed cheerfully, absurdly cheerful, as they vanished into the November morning. And then they were gone. Jake stood there for a moment longer, his shoulders tight with residual tension, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The shaking was worse now, spreading from his hands up his arms, the aftermath of adrenaline and the creeping realization of what he'd just done. He'd put hands on civilians. He'd used force. He'd let the training take over, and now everyone in this diner was looking at him like he was dangerous. Maybe they were right. He forced himself to breathe slowly, deliberately. The four-count pattern his therapist had taught him for managing panic attacks. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. The world gradually came back into focus. The checkered floor, the broken glass, the pink milkshake spreading into the grout lines. And Emma Cross still sitting in her booth with one hand pressed to her cheek, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Are you okay?" His voice came out rougher than he'd intended, scraped raw by adrenaline and the sudden crash that followed it. Emma lowered her hand slowly, revealing the red mark on her face that would probably bruise by tomorrow. Her eyes, green, sharp, carrying too much understanding, studied him for a long moment before she answered. "I don't know." The honest answer fell between them like a confession. "I don't know if I'm okay." Jake crouched down beside her booth. Not in front of her, not looming over her, but beside her, bringing himself to her level. Another small act of consideration that came from training, from learning how to approach civilians who'd been traumatized. How to make yourself less threatening when you just demonstrated exactly how threatening you could be. "I'm sorry that happened to you," he said quietly, "and I'm sorry no one stepped in sooner." The words tasted like ash in his mouth because he knew he was included in that criticism. He'd watched the harassment start, had noticed the boys targeting her, and he'd stayed seated, had told himself it wasn't his problem, wasn't his fight. He'd only moved when it escalated to physical violence, and by then the damage had already been done. "You did," Emma said softly. "You stepped in." He shook his head slightly. "Should have happened sooner. Should have happened the second they opened their mouths." Carol rushed over with a broom and dustpan, her face flushed with shame. "Honey, I'm so sorry, I just froze. Let me clean this up. And your breakfast is on the house." "It's fine," Emma said automatically, though it clearly wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. Jake stood up, his knee creaking slightly from the sudden movement, and addressed Carol. "Could you bring her a new milkshake? Same kind." He glanced at Emma. "Have you eaten anything?" "I'm not hungry anymore," she admitted. "Something warm to drink then. Coffee, tea." "Coffee," Emma heard herself say. "Black." Carol nodded and hurried away, grateful for something productive to do, for a way to be helpful after failing to be brave. Jake looked down at Emma again, the stranger he'd just defended, this woman who carried herself with a strength that suggested she'd survived worse than cruel teenagers in a diner. "Do you want me to call someone? Friend, family, anyone you'd like here?" She shook her head. "No, I'll be okay." "Mind if I sit?" He gestured to the booth across from her. "Just for a few minutes. I don't think you should be alone right now." Emma considered this. Every instinct told her to refuse, to maintain her walls, to process this privately the way she processed everything else. 5 years of learning to be strong alone, of building a life that didn't require depending on anyone. But something about this man, this stranger who'd done what no one else would, made her say, "Okay." He slid into the opposite seat carefully, as if aware that she might still bolt, might still decide she wanted solitude over company. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Carol returned with coffee and a fresh strawberry milkshake, setting them down with trembling hands before retreating once more. Emma wrapped both hands around the warm mug, letting the heat seep into her palms. The stranger cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable in a way that suggested he wasn't used to not knowing what to do. "I'm Jake, by the way, Jake Morrison." Emma, she paused, decades of carefully constructed privacy warring with a sudden, inexplicable desire to be honest with this person. Emma Cross. If he recognized the name, if he'd ever heard of Cross Technologies or read about her company in the news, he gave no indication. He just nodded. "It's good to meet you, Emma. I wish the circumstances were different." "Me too." They sat in silence for another moment, the diner slowly resuming its normal rhythm around them. The elderly couple returned to their breakfast. The truck driver went back to his newspaper, though Emma noticed he kept glancing over as if checking that she was truly okay. Even Carol seemed to have regained some composure, though she moved through her tasks with the mechanical precision of someone trying very hard not to think about what had just happened. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said eventually. "Sure." "How often does that happen? People treating you like those kids did?" Emma considered the question carefully. No one had ever asked her that so directly, so genuinely, without the cushion of politeness or the expectation that she'd minimize her own experience to make them comfortable. "More often than you'd think." She kept her voice level, factual. "Less often than it used to. Most people aren't cruel. They're just uncomfortable. They don't know how to act around disability, so they either ignore it completely or make it the only thing they see." Those boys were the extreme end. But the middle ground, the starring, the pity, the assumptions that I need help with everything, that's daily. Jake listened with the kind of attention that suggested he was actually hearing her, not just waiting for his turn to speak. "That's exhausting," he said simply. "It is." The validation felt unexpected, almost foreign. Most people, when she tried to explain what it was like, either told her she was being too sensitive or launched into stories about their own grandmother's hip replacement or their cousin's broken ankle, as if temporary injury was the same as permanent disability. "For what it's worth," Jake continued, "I don't know your story and you don't have to tell me. But from where I'm sitting, you look like someone who's been through something hard and came out the other side intact. Takes strength to do that. Those kids, they didn't see strength. But that's their failure, not yours." Something cracked inside Emma's chest. Not breaking, but opening. A small fissure in the armor she'd built so carefully, so deliberately, to protect herself from exactly this kind of vulnerability. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. Jake shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Just the truth." They fell into a more comfortable silence this time. Emma sipped her coffee, finding it stronger than she usually preferred but welcome nonetheless. Jake ordered a cup for himself when Carol came by again, insisting on paying despite the waitress's protest that it was on the house. "You have kids?" The question surprised Emma even as she asked it. Jake's face lit up immediately, the transformation sudden and complete. "Yeah, a daughter, Lily, she's 9. His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes for the first time since Emma had noticed him hunched over his cold coffee at the counter. "Smart, stubborn, asks about 1,000,000 questions a day. She wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up. Changes her mind every other week, but that's the current plan." "Sounds wonderful." "She is." The smile faded slightly. Grew more serious. "I'm raising her on my own. Her mom, my wife, she passed away when Lily was born. Complications during delivery." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. "Thank you." He looked down at his coffee, and Emma could see the weight of that loss still sitting on his shoulders even 9 years later. "It's been hard, but Lily's the reason I get up every morning, the reason I keep trying to be better than I was the day before." Emma understood that immediately. The way grief could either destroy you or forge you into something harder, something more intentional. She felt it after her own accident, after her fiancé had walked away, after she'd had to rebuild herself from nothing. You use what breaks you, or you let it bury you. There was no third option. Is that why you stood up, she asked, back there with those boys? Jake considered this, his calloused fingers wrapped around the coffee mug. Partly. I keep thinking about what kind of world I'm leaving for Lily, what kind of people she'll encounter, and I realized a while back that if I want her to grow up in a world where people stand up for what's right, then I have to be someone who stands up. Can't expect others to be brave if I'm not willing to be. Emma studied him across the table, this mechanic with grease under his nails and wisdom in his words, this single father who'd lost his wife but not his compass. You work around here. Yeah, at Morrison's Auto Repair, couple blocks down. It's my dad's old place, was his place. He passed 3 years ago. Now it's mine for whatever that's worth. There was something in the way he said it, a bitterness that suggested the inheritance hadn't been the blessing it should have been. Emma filed that information away, her business mind already cataloging details even as her emotional self was still processing the trauma of the last 20 minutes. Good place to work, she asked carefully. He nodded, though the smile didn't quite reach his eyes this time. Yeah, mostly. It's struggling, honestly. Whole industry is around here, but we do good work, honest work, try to treat people right. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing and everything. Jake told her about teaching Lily to change a tire last summer, about the small house they rented on Elm Street, about his own father who'd been a mechanic before him and had taught Jake everything he knew about engines and integrity. Emma, in turn, shared carefully edited pieces of herself. She talked about the accident in broad strokes, about learning to walk again, about missing simple things like running or dancing or moving through the world without having to calculate every step. It was the most honest conversation she'd had with a stranger in years. Eventually, Jake glanced at his watch and winced. I should get going, I'm already late. And Leo, the guy who works with me, worked with my dad for 35 years. He's probably wondering if I got arrested or something. Because of me, Emma said, I'm sorry. Don't be. Some things are more important than being on time. He stood up, pulling out his wallet, but Emma was faster. Please, she said quickly, let me. It's the least I can do. Jake hesitated, then nodded. All right, thank you. He paused at the edge of the booth, looking down at her one more time. Are you sure you're okay? I can wait if you want someone to walk you to your car. I'm okay, Emma assured him. Really, thank you, Jake, for everything. He smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. Take care of yourself, Emma. Then he was gone, disappearing through the diner's front door and into the cold November morning, leaving Emma alone with her second milkshake and 1,000 thoughts she couldn't quite organize. She sat there for a long moment, feeling the warmth of the coffee mug against her palms, feeling the ache in her cheek where the boy had struck her, feeling something else she couldn't name stirring in her chest. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant, board meeting in 90 minutes, merger documents need her signature before 11. Reality came rushing back. She was Emma Cross, CEO of a $4 billion company, not just a woman who'd been rescued in a diner. She had responsibilities, obligations, an empire to run. But as she gathered her crutches and stood carefully, testing her balance, she found herself thinking about Jake Morrison. About his calloused hands and his kind eyes and the way he'd crouched beside her booth instead of looming over her. About the fact that he had a struggling garage and a daughter to support and probably more problems than he'd admitted. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app, typed Jake Morrison, Morrison's Auto Repair, daughter Lily, age 9, wife deceased, father deceased 3 years, then she added, good man, rare. Emma paid her bill, leaving a $100 tip that made Carol's eyes go wide. Thank you for being ready to help, she said quietly. Next time, be the first one to stand up. Outside, the November air bit at her exposed skin. She settled into her modified SUV, hand controls instead of foot pedals, another expensive adaptation that bought her independence. Her phone buzzed again. 3 more messages from her assistant, each more urgent than the last. But before she drove away, Emma pulled up the county records database on her phone. She had access to commercial real estate listings across 12 states, part of Cross Technologies' ongoing expansion into manufacturing facilities. She typed in Morrison's Auto Repair, Jackson County. The property record came up immediately. 3-bay garage, built 1976, currently mortgaged through First National Bank. Status: 59 days from foreclosure. Outstanding debt: $212,000. Emma stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she forwarded the information to her head of acquisitions with a simple message: "Get me everything on this property and the surrounding 5 blocks. I want options on my desk by tomorrow morning." She drove back to the city thinking about Jake's hands on that boy's wrist, the controlled precision of his movements, the way he'd known exactly how much force to use and where to apply it. Military training, probably. The kind of skills that didn't come from fixing cars. The kind of person who knew how to protect people, who'd probably done it professionally before civilian life had claimed him. The kind of person Cross Technologies could use. The kind of person who deserved better than watching his father's legacy get repossessed by a bank. The board meeting was exactly as tedious as she'd expected. 45 minutes of executives arguing about profit margins and market share, while Emma's cheek throbbed, and her mind kept drifting back to a roadside diner, where a stranger had defended her honor with the quiet confidence of someone who'd made it his life's work to stand between danger and the innocent. When the meeting finally ended, she retreated to her office and called her head of security, a former FBI agent who handled background checks and threat assessments. "I need you to run a full background on someone," she said. "Jake Morrison, 34, Jackson County, former military, probably special operations based on his movement patterns. Currently owns Morrison's Auto Repair. I want service records, credit history, criminal background, everything." "Is this for a security position?" "Maybe, or maybe something else. Just get me the information." The report came back 6 hours later. Emma read it sitting at her desk while the city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office. Jake James Morrison, born Jackson County 1992, joined the Marines at 18, selected for Raider training at 20, served 11 years with the 3rd Marine Raider Battalion, including 5 deployments, Purple Heart recipient after IED injury to right shoulder and left knee during combat operation. Medical discharge at 31 with full disability benefits, returned to Jackson County, assumed ownership of Morrison's Auto Repair after father's death from heart failure, single father to Lily Marie Morrison, age 9, wife deceased during childbirth, no criminal record, credit score 715 despite current financial difficulties, outstanding debts primarily from medical bills from daughter's birth complications and business loans on the garage, community standing excellent. Known as reliable, honest, good with kids, volunteers at daughter's school, no red flags. Emma read the report 3 times, absorbing every detail. Then she pulled up the property assessment her acquisitions team had sent over. The 5-block radius around Morrison's Auto Repair included 2 other automotive businesses, a small medical clinic, an accountant's office, and a coffee shop. Prime location for the manufacturing facility Cross Technologies was planning to build in Jackson County. Having an automotive partner already established in the community would smooth the way for local acceptance, provide jobs for existing residents, demonstrate corporate responsibility. It made perfect business sense. That's what she told herself as she drafted the proposal. That's what she'd tell the board when they inevitably questioned her decision to invest $2 million into a failing garage owned by a man she'd known for less than an hour. But sitting alone in her office at midnight with the city spread out below her like a carpet of lights, Emma knew the truth. This wasn't just business. This was gratitude and curiosity and something else she didn't quite want to name. This was wanting to help someone who'd helped her, wanting to see if a good man given a real chance could become something extraordinary. She built an empire from a hospital bed. Maybe Jake Morrison could build one from a garage. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Jake. Hope it's okay. Carol gave me your number. Just wanted to make sure you got home safe." Emma stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I did. Thank you for asking, and for this morning." The response came quickly. Anyone would have done the same thing. She smiled alone in her office, "But they didn't, you did." Three dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Finally, get some rest. That was a rough morning." "You too," Emma replied. Then, before she could second-guess herself, "Are you free tomorrow afternoon? I'd like to discuss a business opportunity." The three dots took longer this time. "I don't take charity, ma'am." "It's not charity, it's business. Cross Technologies is expanding into Jackson County. I need an automotive partner. Your garage is in the right location. If you're interested, we can talk. If not, no hard feelings." 5 minutes passed. Then, "What time?" "2 p.m. I'll come to your garage." She sent the message, then added, "And Jake, stop calling me ma'am. It's Emma." His response made her smile. "Yes, ma'am, I mean Emma, see you tomorrow." Emma set down her phone and looked out at the city, at the empire she'd built from pain and determination, and refusing to let the world's cruelty define her limits. Tomorrow, she'd drive back to Jackson County. Tomorrow, she'd make an offer to a man who'd probably refuse it out of pride. Tomorrow, she'd take the first step towards something she couldn't quite see yet but could feel waiting just beyond the horizon. For the first time in 5 years, Emma Cross felt something other than driven. She felt hopeful. Morrison's Auto Repair sat 2 blocks off Main Street like an afterthought, tucked between a vacant lot and a building supply warehouse that had closed 4 years earlier. The structure itself was low and concrete block, painted faded blue sometime in the 90s. 3 bay doors faced the street, windows so grimy they turned the interior into shadows. Oil stains darkened the cracked asphalt out front, and a hand-painted sign hung crooked above the office door. "Morrison's Auto Repair. Honest work since 1976. Emma pulled her SUV into the lot at precisely 2 p.m., nodding the ancient pickup truck parked off to one side, the toolboxes stacked against the building's exterior, the general air of a business hanging on by its fingernails. Through the open bay doors, she could see 2 figures moving, hear the pneumatic hiss of air tools, smell motor oil and metal shavings on the cold afternoon breeze. She grabbed her crutches from the passenger seat and made her way across uneven pavement that would have been a lawsuit waiting to happen if this were corporate property. The man who noticed her first was older, silver-haired, wearing coveralls that had seen better decades. He straightened from an engine compartment, wiping his hands on a rag that only redistributed the grease. "Help you, miss." "I'm looking for Jake Morrison. Is he working today?" The older man's expression shifted, not suspicious exactly, but curious in the way small-town people got when strangers showed up asking questions. "He's in Bay 3. Something I can help you with." "I just need to speak with him briefly." Leo Donovan studied her for another moment, taking in the expensive SUV, the tailored coat, the prosthetic leg she wasn't bothering to hide. Then he nodded toward the far bay. "Through there. Mind the air hose. It's got a habit of trying to trip people." "I'll watch out for it." The garage interior was warmer, heated by industrial units mounted near the ceiling. Tools hung on pegboards with the precision of surgical instruments. Parts bins labeled in faded marker. Calendars from auto supply companies featuring muscle cars and improbable women. The space smelled like every garage Emma had ever been in, that particular combination of oil and brake fluid and honest labor that no amount of corporate polish could replicate. Jake was bent over an engine, completely absorbed in whatever mechanical problem he was solving. He'd pulled his hair back with a rubber band, and his flannel shirt was rolled to the elbows despite the November chill that crept through the open bays. When he moved to reach for a wrench, Emma noticed the slight hitch in his right shoulder, the way he compensated automatically for injuries that had probably never healed quite right. Jake. He turned, confusion flickering across his face for the half-second it took him to recognize her. Context shift, brain adjusting to seeing someone from one world appear unexpectedly in another. Then concern immediately followed. Emma, are you okay? Did something else happen? No, I'm fine. She shifted her weight, suddenly uncertain in a way she rarely felt in boardrooms or on factory floors. I wanted to thank you properly, and I realized I didn't actually get your number or any way to contact you beyond what Carol gave me. This was true, though not the complete truth. The complete truth involved property records and background checks and a business proposal that might get her laughed out of this garage. Or worse. You didn't have to come all the way here for that. Really, anyone would have done the same thing. Except no one did, except you. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable with praise the same way Leo had been uncomfortable with strangers. Yeah, well, right time, right place, I guess. I don't think it was chance. I think it was character. Before Jake could respond, another voice cut through the garage. Morrison, you planning to finish that timing belt today, or should I tell Mrs. Patterson to come back next week? The voice belonged to Leo, who'd emerged from what looked like an office, tall and rail-thin with wire-rimmed glasses and the permanent squint of someone who'd spent too many years reading fine print on invoices. This was the man who'd worked beside Jake's father for 35 years, who'd handed over the keys with tears and warnings. Be done in 30 minutes, Leo. Just had to replace a tensioner pulley that was about to give out. Better to fix it now than have her stranded on the highway. Leo grunted, which seemed to be acceptance, then noticed Emma. His expression shifted to polite confusion. Can I help you, miss? If you're here for a repair, Jake's tied up, but I can take a look. Actually, Emma interrupted smoothly, I'm here to speak with both of you about this property. The temperature in the garage seemed to drop 10 degrees. Leo's face went carefully neutral, the kind of expression people develop when they've been disappointed too many times to show hope anymore. Jake glanced between them, clearly lost. I'm sorry, he said slowly. What property? Emma kept her eyes on Leo. Perhaps we should talk in your office. This isn't a conversation for the garage floor. Leo studied her for a long, assessing moment. Something in her bearing, her confidence, the expensive cut of her coat must have registered. Then he nodded curtly. All right, this way. Jake caught Emma's arm gently as she turned to follow. Wait, what's going on? What property? She looked at him, this man who defended her without knowing who she was, without expecting anything in return. Come with me. You should hear this too. The office was exactly what 40 years of running a small business looked like. Filing cabinets overflowing with paper, a desk buried under invoices and repair manuals, a coffee maker that had probably been new during the Reagan administration. The walls were covered with photographs, Leo with various employees over the decades, a much younger Leo shaking hands with the mayor, kids' drawings that had faded to sepia tones. There were only 2 chairs. Leo took one behind the desk. Jake remained standing, arms crossed, expression guarded in a way it hadn't been at the diner. Emma positioned herself near the window, crutches planted firmly. My name is Emma Cross. I'm the founder and CEO of Cross Technologies. She watched Jake's face carefully, saw the moment the name registered, saw confusion transform to shock, transform to something that might have been betrayal. He stopped, started again. You own this building. As of when? No, not yet anyway, but I looked into acquiring it after what happened yesterday. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush diamonds. Leo leaned back in his chair, springs creaking. So you're here to tell us we're being shut down. That's why you wanted to talk. No, actually, I'm here to tell you the opposite. Both men stared at her. Emma had given 1,000 pitches in her career, convinced investors to commit millions, swayed boards and shareholders and hostile acquisition targets. But standing in this cramped office that smelled like old coffee and desperation, facing a man who'd saved her and another who looked like he'd heard too many false promises, she felt genuine nervousness coil in her stomach. When my company researched this property, the plan was to assess operations, determine viability, make decisions accordingly. That might have meant restructuring. It might have meant closure. It might have meant conversion to a different use entirely. And now, Leo's voice was tight as wire. Now I'm looking at this place differently. She met Jake's eyes, saw the weariness there, the way he'd closed himself off to protect against disappointment. Because someone reminded me yesterday that integrity matters more than profit margins, that people aren't just assets on a balance sheet, that sometimes doing the right thing is more important than doing the efficient thing. She took a breath. I want to invest in Morrison's auto repair, real investment, upgrade the equipment, expand from 3 bays to 8, modernize the systems while keeping what works, turn this into a flagship location, a full-service automotive center that serves not just this town but the entire county. Leo's mouth had fallen open slightly, years of disappointment making it hard to process hope. Jake's expression remained unreadable, locked down behind whatever walls he'd built to survive military service and single fatherhood and watching his father's legacy crumble. But I'll need someone to manage it. Emma kept her gaze locked on Jake. Someone who understands both the work and the people, someone who leads by example, someone with the kind of character that can't be taught or bought. You're offering me a job. It wasn't a question, and his voice held no warmth. I'm offering you a partnership, management position with equity stake, full benefits, including health care and an education fund for Lily. Salary triple what you're making now, with performance bonuses tied to customer satisfaction metrics rather than pure profit. The office had gone absolutely silent, except for the distant sounds of Leo's apprentice working in the bay, air tools and classic rock radio, and someone laughing at a joke Emma couldn't hear. Jake shook his head slowly, and she watched his jaw work as he processed information that didn't match his worldview. You can't be serious. I'm extremely serious. You don't even know me. We talked for 20 minutes in a diner. I know enough. I know you stood up when no one else would. I know you asked if I was okay before you worried about being late to work. I know you're raising a daughter alone and trying to be the kind of person who makes the world better instead of worse. That tells me everything I need to know about how you'll treat employees, how you'll serve customers, how you'll run a business. Jake looked at Leo, almost desperate for an anchor point, something to make sense of a reality that had shifted too fast. Leo, tell her this is crazy. But Leo was looking at Emma with something like wonder. How much investment are we talking about? Initial capital injection of $2 million, more if the expansion goes well. We'd keep all current employees who want to stay with raises across the board. Leo, I'd want you to stay on as senior advisor. Your institutional knowledge is invaluable and the community trusts you. But day-to-day operations would transition to new management. She pulled a business card from her wallet and set it on Leo's desk, plain white with embossed letters. Emma Cross, CEO, Cross Technologies. Below that, a phone number and email address. I'm not asking for an answer today. Think about it. Talk to your employees. Look at Cross Technologies' track record. We invest in communities, not strip them bare. She turned back to Jake. And Jake, I meant what I said. This isn't charity. This isn't gratitude for what you did yesterday, though I am grateful. This is a business decision based on recognizing someone with the exact qualities I need in a leader. I'm a mechanic. His voice was rough, scraped raw by emotions he was trying to keep contained. I fix cars. I don't manage multi-million-dollar operations. Neither did I until I had to learn, and I'll make sure you have all the training and support you need. But the skills that matter most, the integrity, the judgment, the ability to see people as people, those can't be taught. You already have them. Emma picked up her crutches and moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Jake, what you did yesterday mattered. Not because it led to this. You couldn't have known that would happen. It mattered because you saw someone being hurt and you decided that wasn't acceptable. In a world that increasingly tells people to mind their own business, to stay silent, to let someone else handle it, you chose differently. That's rare. And rare is valuable. She left before either man could respond, making her way back through the garage. The apprentice nodded at her as she passed, and she nodded back, already cataloging the layout in her mind, seeing how the space could be transformed, what it could become with proper investment and vision. Outside, the November air had teeth. She settled into her SUV and sat there for a moment, hands trembling slightly against the steering wheel. She just offered a management position to someone she'd known for less than 24 hours. Her board would think she'd lost her mind. Her CFO would demand justification, data, projections. But Emma had built a $4 billion company by trusting her instincts as much as her spreadsheets. And every instinct she had was screaming that Jake Morrison was exactly the kind of person she needed. Not despite his ordinariness, but because of it. Her phone buzzed. Her assistant. Board wants emergency meeting about the Jackson County expansion. They've heard rumors you're personally involved in site selection. She typed back, tell them I'll brief everyone next week. Right now, we're in preliminary assessment phase. The response came quickly. They're not going to like being kept in the dark. They'll survive. Emma set the phone down and pulled out of the lot, watching Morrison's auto repair shrink in her rearview mirror. Through the bay doors, she could see two figures standing close together, Leo and Jake, in what looked like intense conversation. She hoped Leo was talking sense into him. Hoped the older man could see the opportunity for what it was. But she'd learned long ago that you couldn't force people to accept help. Couldn't make them believe in possibilities they'd trained themselves not to see. All she could do was make the offer and wait. 3 days passed like years. Emma threw herself into work with an intensity that even her assistant noticed, burying herself in product launches and patent applications and video conferences that ran until 3 in the morning. She tried not to think about Jackson County or Jake Morrison, or the fact that her phone remained stubbornly silent. On the 4th morning, her assistant buzzed through on the intercom. Miss Cross, there's a Jake Morrison here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says, and I'm quoting here, tell her I'll wait. I've got all day. Emma stood from her desk, smoothed her charcoal suit jacket, and moved to the center of her office. Send him in. The door opened and Jake stepped through. The contrast was almost jarring. Clean jeans and a button-down shirt that looked freshly ironed. Hair neatly combed. But nothing could disguise the fact that he was a working man in a workspace designed for executives. He stopped just inside the door, taking in the massive office, the view of the city spread out like a promise, the desk that probably cost more than his truck. Jesus, the words slipped out quiet, almost reverent, this is really your life. Part of it, please sit. She gestured to the seating area by the window, leather chairs arranged around a glass coffee table, deliberately not her desk. This needed to be a conversation between equals, not a boss addressing an employee. Jake sat stiffly, like he might break the furniture through sheer working-class awkwardness. Emma took the chair across from him and waited, giving him space to find whatever words had brought him here. I've been thinking about your offer. He cleared his throat. Leo told me you two talked, that the deal's moving forward either way. It is. I looked up your company, read about you, about the accident, about how you built Cross Technologies, about your focus on accessibility technology. He met her eyes and she saw something shift in his expression, some decision being made in real time. Why didn't you tell me any of that at the diner? Would it have mattered? Maybe, I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting the careful combing. I can't tell if you're offering me this job because of what I did or because you actually think I can do it. Both. Honesty felt like the only option with someone who could probably smell lies from 3 counties away. What you did showed me your character, but character alone isn't enough. I've spent the last 3 days having my team look into you, Jake, quietly, respectfully, but thoroughly. His jaw tightened. You investigated me. I verified what I already suspected, that you've worked at Morrison for however many years with perfect attendance, that you're known in town as someone reliable, honest, good with kids, that you volunteer at your daughter's school, that when Mrs. Patterson's alternator died last winter, you fixed it for free because you knew she was on a fixed income, that you're respected by everyone who knows you. Anyone would have helped Mrs. Patterson. That's where you're wrong. Not anyone would have, but you did. Just like you stood up in that diner when nobody else would. You see the pattern here. Jake was quiet for a long moment, processing. I don't have a college degree, never even finished community college. Lily got sick when she was 4, needed surgery, and I dropped out to work full time. I don't care about degrees, I care about judgment. I've never managed anything bigger than a 3-person rotation schedule. I'll provide training, business courses, leadership development, whatever you need. We have entire departments dedicated to employee growth. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped. Emma, I need you to be straight with me. Is this because you feel guilty about what happened? Because if it is, I don't want it. I don't need pity. It's not pity. Her voice came out sharper than intended, colored by frustration that he couldn't see what she saw. It's recognition. There's a difference. How do I know this isn't going to fall apart? That 6 months from now, you won't decide this was a mistake and I'll be back where I started. Except I'll have moved Lily to a new school, bought into a life we can't sustain. Jake, the sharpness in her voice cut through his spiral. Stop. He fell silent, watching her with eyes that had seen too much disappointment to trust easily. Emma took a breath, forced herself to speak more gently. I understand fear. I understand what it's like to have everything fall apart and wonder if you'll ever be able to trust stability again. But I'm not offering you a fantasy. I'm offering you a real job with real expectations and real support. You'll work hard. Some days will be brutal. You'll make mistakes and you'll have to learn from them, but I will not abandon you. That's not how I operate. She stood and moved to her desk, pulling out a folder she'd prepared 2 days earlier just in case. This is the contract. Read it. Take it to a lawyer if you want. It's ironclad. 5-year commitment from both sides with clear performance benchmarks and mutual termination clauses. You're protected and so am I. Jake opened the folder and stared at the numbers. Emma watched his face carefully, saw the moment the salary registered, saw shock bloom across his features like sunrise. This can't be right. It's right. This is more than triple what I make now. Emma, this is. He looked up, and she saw moisture gathering in the corners of his eyes. Do you know what this would mean for Lily? The schools she could go to, the opportunities she'd have. The fact that I could actually save for her college instead of just hopping I don't die before she graduates high school. That's exactly why I'm offering it. Because you're not thinking about what it means for you. You're thinking about what it means for your daughter. That's what makes you the right person. Jake set the folder down carefully, like it might explode if handled too roughly. I need time to think about this. Of course, take a week, 2 if you need it. He stood, and they faced each other across the glass coffee table. 2 people whose lives had intersected in violence and kindness just days ago, who were now navigating something neither of them fully understood. Why me? The question came out barely above a whisper. Really, why me? Emma considered how to answer. She could talk about leadership potential, about community respect, about all the rational business reasons that would satisfy her board. But instead, she told him the truth. Because when I was sitting in that diner with a red mark on my face and broken glass at my feet, feeling smaller than I'd felt in years, You saw me as a person worth defending, not as a disability, not as a victim, as someone with dignity who deserved to be treated with respect. And then you sat with me and talked to me like an equal, like a human being. She paused, making sure he was really hearing her. That's rare, Jake, and I've learned that rare is worth building an entire business around. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite acceptance, but maybe the beginning of it. Understanding, perhaps, that this wasn't about pity or guilt, but about recognizing value where others had overlooked it. I'll think about it, he said again, but his voice held less resistance now. I'll give you an answer by the end of the week. That's all I ask. She walked him to the door, and just before he left, Jake turned back. For what it's worth, I'm glad I was there yesterday morning. Not because of this, because you didn't deserve what those kids did to you. Nobody does. I know, thank you. After he left, Emma returned to her desk and sat in the quiet of her office, hands folded in front of her. She'd done everything she could. Made the offer, explained the reasoning, provided protection and security. Now the decision was his. And for the first time in years, Emma found herself hopping, truly hopping, that someone would choose to trust her. Not because of her money or her company or her success, but because of what they'd seen in each other on a cold November morning, when cruelty and kindness had collided in a roadside diner. The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Emma attended meetings and reviewed quarterly reports and approved budgets, but some part of her mind remained fixed on Jackson County, on a garage that smelled like honest work, on a single father who was probably wrestling with the most important decision of his life. Friday afternoon arrived with slate-gray clouds and the threat of early snow. Emma stood at her office window watching the city below when her phone finally rang. Jake's name appeared on the screen. She let it ring twice more before answering, willing her voice to remain steady. "Hello, Jake." "Hey," his voice sounded rough, like he'd been up all night. "I've got an answer for you." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm listening." A pause stretched between them, filled with static and possibility, and the weight of choices that would reshape both their futures. I talked to Lily about it. Didn't give her all the details. Just asked what she thought about maybe moving to a bigger house someday, going to a school with better science programs. You know what she said? What? She asked if we'd still be close to her friends, if we'd still have movie nights on Fridays, if I'd still tuck her in at night. His voice cracked slightly, and Emma found herself gripping the phone tighter. Made me realize something. She doesn't care about the money or the opportunities. She just wants to make sure we're still us. That's a smart kid. She is. Jake took a breath, and Emma could almost see him straightening his shoulders, making the leap. So I'm saying yes, but I need you to understand something first. I'm doing this for her, but I'm also doing it because I think you're right. I think I can do this. And I'm tired of playing it safe when playing it safe means staying stuck. Relief flooded through Emma so powerfully she had to sit down. You won't regret this, Jake. I promise you that. I'm going to hold you to it. She could hear the smile in his voice now, tension releasing into something lighter. When do we start? Monday, come to the office at 9. We'll do the paperwork, set up your onboarding schedule, start the transition plan. They talked for another 10 minutes about logistics, what Jake needed to wrap up at the garage, how to handle the announcement to Leo and the apprentice, when to tell Lily the full story. By the time they hung up, Emma felt lighter than she had in days, like some weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had finally lifted. Her assistant appeared in the doorway moments later, eyebrows raised. Was that good news? Because you're actually smiling, which is terrifying. We just hired a new operations manager for the Jackson County expansion. The satisfaction in her voice was unmistakable, undeniable. The mechanic, her assistant, had read the preliminary reports, knew the basics of what she was proposing. He actually said yes. He did. The board is going to ask questions. They're going to want to know why you're promoting someone with no management experience into a multi-million-dollar operation. Then I'll tell them the truth, that I'm betting on character and integrity, and that those qualities are worth more than an MBA. You really believe that? Emma thought about the diner, about the slap that still occasionally haunted her dreams, about the moment Jake had stood up when no one else would. Yes, she said, I really do. Monday morning came faster than Jake expected, and not fast enough. He arrived at Cross Technologies headquarters at 8:45, wearing a suit that Lily had helped him pick out at the department store, practicing his handshake like his daughter had coached him through the previous evening. The building was glass and steel and intimidation, 30 stories of corporate success that made Morrison's auto repair look like something from a different century. Emma met him in the lobby herself, and he watched several employees do double takes at seeing their CEO personally greeting a visitor. She wore a navy suit today, hair pulled back, moving through the space with the easy confidence of someone who owned it. You didn't have to dress up. Her voice held gentle amusement. We're pretty casual here unless we're meeting with investors. Lily helped me pick it out. She made me practice my handshake about 50 times last night. The image made Emma smile, genuine warmth breaking through her professional composure. She sounds like she's handling this well. She's scared but excited. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside, heading up to the executive floor. Makes two of us, I guess. The first few hours were a blur of paperwork, contracts and tax forms and benefits enrollment and confidentiality agreements. Emma's assistant handled most of it with professional efficiency, though Jake caught the man watching him with barely concealed curiosity, probably wondering what kind of person their CEO would personally recruit. Around noon, Emma took Jake to lunch at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the office. I want to talk about the transition timeline, she said once they'd ordered, pulling out a tablet. Leo's willing to stay on for 6 months as senior advisor, which gives you time to learn the business side without having to manage everything alone immediately. Jake nodded, fingers drumming nervously against the table. That's good. I know the mechanical work inside and out, but the business stuff, inventory management, payroll, customer relation systems, that's all new territory. We'll train you. Starting next week, you'll spend 3 days here in the city working with our operations team, learning our systems. The other 2 days you'll be on site at the garage, shadowing current processes. After the first month, we'll flip that ratio, more time in Jackson County, less time here. And Lily, I've arranged for a car service to get her to and from school on the days you're in the city. Leo's wife volunteered to be the backup contact if there's an emergency. Emma showed him the detailed schedule on her tablet, color-coded and precise. You'll never be more than 2 hours away from her, and once you're fully transitioned into the role, you'll work primarily from Jackson County. This training period is temporary. Jake studied the schedule, and some of the tension eased from his shoulders. You've really thought of everything. I told you I would. Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Jake set down his fork and looked at her directly. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. That morning in the diner, how often does stuff like that happen to you? Emma considered her answer carefully. The physical assault, that was rare. The mockery, the starring, the assumptions, that's regular enough that I've stopped keeping count. Jake's jaw tightened. That's not right. No, it's not, but it's reality. The world isn't built for bodies like mine. Not physically, not socially. Every day is a negotiation between what I want to do and what the world makes easy or hard. She paused, pride creeping into her voice. That's actually why I started Cross Technologies. I got tired of negotiating, decided to build technology that changed the conversation. The accessibility stuff. I read about your smart prosthetics program, the ones with AI integration that learn the user's gait patterns. That's one division. We also make navigation systems for the visually impaired, communication devices for non-verbal individuals, workplace accommodation technology. Last year, we developed an exoskeleton system that helps paraplegics walk. Still in testing, but early results are promising. Jake was quiet for a moment, absorbing the scope of what she'd built. You're changing lives. I'm trying to, one innovation at a time. Makes what I do seem pretty small in comparison. Don't, the sharpness in her voice surprised them both. Don't diminish your work. You keep people safe. You make sure families can get to work, get kids to school, get to the hospital in emergencies. That matters just as much as anything I do. Different scale, same impact. Something in Jake's expression softened. Thanks for saying that. They finished lunch and returned to the office, where Emma introduced Jake to the various department heads he'd be working with over the coming months. Each meeting followed the same pattern: initial surprise at his background, followed by cautious assessment, followed by grudging respect when he asked intelligent questions and admitted what he didn't know. By the end of the day, Jake looked exhausted but energized in a way Emma recognized from her own early years building the company. "This is really happening," he said as they stood in the parking garage beside his truck, an F-150 that had seen better days but was meticulously maintained. "It really is." Jake hesitated, hand on the truck's door handle. "I know I already said this, but thank you for seeing something in me that I didn't see in myself. You would have seen it eventually. I just moved up the timeline." She watched him drive away, then returned to her own vehicle, the modified SUV with hand controls that felt familiar, comfortable in a way most spaces never did. Independence was priceless, worth every dollar she'd spent adapting her life to match her capabilities. The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm. Jake split his time between the city and Jackson County, soaking up information with the focused intensity of someone who understood that failure wasn't an option. He learned cross-technologies, operational systems, studied business management principles, attended workshops on leadership and conflict resolution. In the evenings, he'd call Emma with questions, and they'd talk through scenarios and strategies until Lily needed him for homework or bedtime. A friendship grew between them, built on mutual respect and the shared understanding of what it meant to rebuild yourself after loss. Emma found herself looking forward to those evening calls, to Jake's perspective that combined practical wisdom with genuine curiosity about systems he'd never encountered before. 6 weeks into the transition, Emma made an unannounced visit to Morrison's auto repair. She arrived mid-morning on a Thursday, parking her SUV in the customer lot where construction equipment now sat alongside the existing bays. The expansion had begun, concrete poured for 5 additional service positions, new lifts being installed with the kind of precision that came from working with contractors who knew what mattered. Through the open bay door, she could see Jake conducting a team meeting. He'd pushed back against the idea initially, uncomfortable with formal meetings, but Emma had insisted that good leadership required good communication. Now she watched from the doorway as he addressed the mechanics gathered around a workbench covered in diagrams and schedules. "So, starting next month, we're implementing the new inventory system." His voice carried confidence without arrogance, the tone of someone who'd learned to lead by listening. "I know it's going to be an adjustment, and yeah, there's going to be a learning curve, but Miss Cross's team will be here to train us. And the system's going to save us hours of looking for parts and tracking down orders." "What if we can't figure out the computer stuff?" Leo's voice was tinged with the weariness of someone who'd seen too many changes fail. "I'm not exactly tech-savvy." "Then we'll get you training. Nobody's getting left behind, that's a promise." Emma felt satisfaction settle over her like warmth. This was exactly what she'd hoped for, watching Jake take ownership, build trust, lead with the same integrity he'd shown that morning in the diner. Leo noticed her first and waved her over, Suddenly all the mechanics were straightening slightly, aware they were being observed by the woman who owned everything. "Miss Cross." Leo's voice held genuine welcome. "Didn't know you were visiting today. Just wanted to check on progress. Don't let me interrupt." But Jake had already wrapped up the meeting, dismissing the team with instructions to review the training materials he'd prepared. As the others dispersed, he walked over to Emma with a smile that had become familiar over the past weeks. "Surprise inspection. Informal observation. You're doing well. The team respects you." "They respect Leo. I'm just borrowing his credibility." "That's not what I saw." She gestured toward the office, and they made their way through the familiar space. Leo's office would soon be Jake's once the renovation completed, but for now it remained unchanged. Emma pulled out her tablet once they were settled. "I wanted to show you the architectural plans for the expansion." She swiped through detailed renderings, watching Jake's eyes widen as he took in the scope. "We're adding 4 new bays, upgrading all the lifts, installing a proper customer waiting area with Wi-Fi and coffee. There'll be a dedicated training room for ongoing education, and we're building out a full parts department." "This is massive." Wonder colored his voice, mixed with something that might have been fear. "This is what Jackson County needs. Right now, people have to drive 40 minutes to the next town for major repairs. We're going to change that. Make this a destination, a place people trust." "When does construction start?" "Already has. You saw the equipment outside. We've got permits approved, crews scheduled. 2 months from now, this place will be unrecognizable." Emma closed the tablet and looked at him directly. "Which means in 2 months, you need to be ready to manage a team twice this size, handle customer volume that's going to triple, and deal with all the chaos that comes with rapid growth." She watched worry flicker across his face, but he didn't flinch. "I'll be ready." "I know you will, but I also know you're going to have moments of doubt, moments when this feels impossible. When that happens, I want you to call me, day or night." "Understood." As Emma prepared to leave, Leo caught her attention outside. "Can I have a word, Miss Cross?" They stepped into the cold afternoon air, breath misting in front of their faces. "I wanted you to know that you made the right choice with Jake." Leo's voice was quiet but firm. "I've been watching him these past weeks, and he's grown into the role faster than I expected. The crew trusts him, customers like him, and he's got good instincts for the business side." "I'm glad to hear that." Leo smiled, a rare expression on his weathered face. "You know what the difference is between someone who manages and someone who leads." "Tell me." "Managers focus on systems. Leaders focus on people. Jake's a leader." He glanced back toward the garage, where Jake was visible through the bay doors explaining something to the apprentice with patient gestures. "You saw something in him that day at the diner, something most people miss when they look at a guy covered in grease. That's a gift, Miss Cross. Don't waste it." The words settled over Emma like a weight and a promise. "I don't intend to." That evening, back in her apartment, Emma found a package waiting at her door. No return address, just her name written in careful handwriting. Inside was a child's drawing, crayon on construction paper showing 2 stick figures standing in front of a building labeled garage in wobbly letters. One figure had brown hair and held a wrench. The other had reddish hair and crutches. Above them, a sun smiled down with exaggerated rays. A note was folded inside, written in the same careful hand. "Dear Miss Cross, my dad says you gave him a really important job. He seems happy now. He smiles more. Thank you for that. I drew you this picture of you and my dad at the garage. I hope you like it. Your friend, Lily." Emma stood in her kitchen holding a child's drawing and felt tears slide down her cheeks for the first time since the accident 5 years ago. Not tears of pain or frustration or grief, but something else entirely. Hope, maybe. Or purpose. Or the recognition that sometimes the most important business decisions had nothing to do with profit margins and everything to do with seeing people for who they truly were. She carefully pinned Lily's drawing to her refrigerator, right next to the architectural plans for the garage expansion and a photo of her first product prototype. 3 different versions of building something from nothing. 3 different expressions of the same fundamental truth. Broken things could be made whole again if you were willing to invest in the work. 2 months after construction began, the expanded Morrison's Auto Repair opened on a Saturday morning that felt more like celebration than business. 8 service bays instead of 3. Hydraulic lifts gleaming with new steel. A customer waiting area with floor-to-ceiling windows set at wheelchair height. A parts department that rivaled anything in 3 counties. And a team of 14 mechanics and support staff who'd been trained not just in automotive repair, but in treating every customer with dignity. Jake stood near the ribbon stretched across the main entrance, wearing slacks and a button-down that Lily had insisted made him look professional. Leo stood beside him in his cleanest coveralls, refusing to dress up because this was still a garage, still a place for honest work. Emma arrived precisely at 9, moving through the gathering crowd with the ease of someone who'd become part of Jackson County over these months. No longer the mysterious billionaire, but a neighbor who showed up at town council meetings. The mayor stepped forward with oversized scissors, gave a speech about economic development that made Jake shift uncomfortably. Then the ribbon fell, and people flooded in, marveling at equipment, asking about services. Leo gave tour with the pride of someone who'd watched this place rise from his best friend's dream 4 decades ago, through decline and near death, into something that exceeded imagination. Lily appointed herself unofficial greeter, showing other kids the waiting area's tablet stations. Jake watched his daughter navigate the crowd with confidence he'd never seen before. Watched her light up when Emma crouched down to discuss the garage's new recycling program. "You did this," Leo's voice beside him, rough with emotion. "Your old man would be proud as hell, son." "We did this." Jake turned to the man who'd been more father to him these past years than his own had managed. "You and Miss Cross and everyone who believed this was possible." Leo's eyes were suspiciously wet. "Still, you're the one who had the guts to say yes when she made the offer. That took something your daddy never quite had, the ability to accept help without seeing it as weakness." By noon, they'd scheduled appointments into the following month. By 2, a man named Garrett Hollies arrived. Jake saw the silver Mercedes before he registered the man behind the wheel. Hollies emerged from the vehicle with casual arrogance, 54 years old and wearing it like armor. Custom suit, designer watch, shoes that probably cost more than Jake's monthly salary used to be. He stood surveying the garage with an expression that suggested he was pricing it for auction. Leo's hand landed on Jake's shoulder, gripped tight with warning. "That's trouble walking." "Who is he?" "Garrett Hollies. Owns Hollies Premier Motors on the North End. Your daddy and him had history." "What kind of history?" "The bad kind." Leo's voice had gone flat, decades-old anger beneath professional courtesy. "He tried to put us out of business 20 years ago, undercut our prices, stole our contracts. Your old man never could prove it, but we both knew." Jake felt something cold settle in his gut, and now he's here. Because he doesn't like competition. Hollies approached with the swagger of someone who'd never been told no by people who mattered. He ignored Jake entirely, directing his attention to Emma. "Miss Cross, such a pleasure to finally meet you in person. I'm Garrett Hollies, owner of Hollies Premier Motors. We're the area's premier luxury automotive service provider." Emma's expression remained professionally neutral, but Jake had learned to read the subtle tightening around her eyes. "Mr. Hollies, welcome to our grand opening. Quite the operation you've built here." Hollies gestured at the bays with something that might have been admiration if it hadn't been laced with condescension. "Though I have to wonder about the business model. All this investment in what's essentially a commodity service market." "We charge fair rates for quality work." Jake found himself speaking before he'd consciously decided to engage. "Seems to be working out fine." Hollies turned to look at him properly for the first time, reassessing. And you must be the new manager. Morrison, is it? I knew your father. Sad what happened to this place after he passed. Though I suppose every cloud has a silver lining, given that Miss Cross was able to acquire it at such favorable terms. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Jake's jaw tightened, old combat instincts cataloging vulnerable points on Holly's body. Leo's hand tightened on his shoulder. Actually, I acquired nothing. Emma's voice remained pleasant, but steel ran beneath. Cross Technologies invested in an existing business and its existing owner. Mr. Morrison is an equity partner, not an employee. Perhaps you're confusing us with your own business practices. Holly's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in his eyes. Of course. My mistake. Well, I just wanted to stop by and welcome you to the community. Professional courtesy between colleagues. We appreciate that. Emma extended her hand, and Holly shook it with brief, dismissive contact. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other. Indeed. Holly's headed back to his Mercedes, and Jake watched him pull away with sick certainty that this wasn't over. That night, after the celebration wound down and Lily fell asleep in the truck, Jake called Emma. Tell me about Garrett Hollies. What did Leo say? That he tried to destroy my father's business 20 years ago. That he's not going to like having real competition. Silence on the line. Then, Holly's Premier Motors has controlled 60% of the automotive service market in Jackson County for 15 years. Before that, there were 5 independent garages. Now there's only his and 2 specialty shops that don't compete directly. You think he drove the others out? I think patterns suggest themselves, but proving it is different than suspecting it. Jake leaned back against his headboard. What do? We do exactly what we've been doing. Quality work, fair prices, treating customers like human beings. The best revenge is success, Jake, and right now we're succeeding. He wanted to believe that was enough, but he'd seen enough of the world to know that sometimes the bad guys won simply because they were willing to fight dirtier. Get some sleep, Emma's voice softened. You did something incredible today. Don't let Hollies take that away from you. After they hung up, Jake lay in darkness, listening to the house settle. Down the hall, Lily slept with the easy unconsciousness of children who believed the world was fundamentally good. He'd spent 9 years trying to preserve that innocence. The garage expansion had given him tools to do that: financial stability, health insurance, the ability to save for Lily's future. But it had also painted a target on his back, made him visible to people like Garrett Hollies. Sleep came slowly, troubled by half-formed anxieties. What morning brought was a phone call at 6 a.m. from the veteran who'd taken overnight security. Boss, we got a problem. You need to get down here. Jake arrived 15 minutes later to find 3 windows smashed, glass scattered across the pristine waiting area like crystallized malice. Spray paint covered the front wall in angry red letters: corporate sellout. Go back to your tower. 2 customer vehicles sat on slashed tires, rubber deflated into useless pools. The security guard stood in the wreckage, looking guilty despite having done nothing wrong. I was doing perimeter checks every hour. This happened between my 4 and 5 a.m. rounds. Not your fault. Jake pulled out his phone. Did you call the police? They're on their way. I wanted to call you first. Good man. Jake stood in the center of destruction, breath misting in pre-dawn cold, feeling something familiar and unwelcome uncurl in his chest. The same helplessness he'd felt watching teammates bleed out. The same impotent rage at violence he couldn't defend against. His hands started shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline his body didn't know what to do with. The police arrived, took statements, dusted for prints they probably wouldn't find. The officer was sympathetic but realistic. Vandalism like this, unless we catch them in the act, there's not much we can do. After the police left, Jake stood alone in the waiting area, staring at spray paint and broken glass. The sun was coming up now, pale winter light making the damage look worse somehow. His phone buzzed. Emma's name. "I'm on my way. Don't clean anything up until I see it." She arrived 30 minutes later, picking her way carefully across broken glass, taking in the destruction with eyes that missed nothing. Her expression remained controlled, but Jake saw fury burning underneath. "Holly's. Can't prove it. We don't have to prove it to know it." She pulled out her phone, took photographs from multiple angles. This was done by someone who knew exactly what would hurt most, not random kids, professionals. "What do we do?" "We install better security. Military-grade cameras, motion sensors that alert directly to your phone and mine. Make this place harder to hit than a bank. And if they come back anyway, then we'll have footage. And footage is evidence." Jake wanted to argue, wanted to suggest more aggressive responses that his raider training whispered were available. But Emma was right. Escalation would only play into Holly's hands. By 10 a.m., they arranged replacements for broken windows and loaner vehicles for affected customers at no charge. By noon, a security company was installing cameras that would have made the Pentagon jealous. By evening, Leo was teaching the crew how to document everything while maintaining operations. Through it all, Jake felt himself splitting into two people: the professional manager who handled logistics, and the trained warrior who wanted to find whoever had done this and exact very specific justice. That evening, Emma stayed late after everyone else had gone. She found Jake in the office staring at security footage from the new cameras, rewinding empty frames from last night. "You can't rewrite what already occurred." He looked up, surprised, just trying to understand the pattern. "You're thinking tactically, like this is a combat zone." Jake didn't answer. Emma moved into the office, settling into the chair across from his desk. "This is business, Jake. Dirty business sometimes, but still business. If you start treating it like war, you'll make decisions that could destroy everything we've built." He knew she was right, but knowing didn't make the rage dissipate. "Talk to me," her voice softened. "What's really going on?" Jake leaned back, forcing himself to articulate what he'd been trying to ignore. "I spent 11 years protecting people. That was my job, my identity. Then I came home and my wife died while I was deployed. My dad died from overwork trying to keep this place afloat. Now someone's attacking something we've built together and I can't." He stopped, jaw clenched. "I can't protect this either. What good is all that training if I can't even keep some thugs from smashing windows?" Silence settled before Emma responded. "You're not failing to protect us, Jake. You're choosing to protect us differently, with cameras instead of violence, with evidence instead of retaliation. That's harder than what you're trained for, and it takes more courage." "Doesn't feel like courage." "Then you don't understand courage as well as you think you do." She leaned forward, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Courage isn't just charging into danger. Sometimes it's restraint. Sometimes it's trusting systems instead of your own hands. Sometimes it's being the father who shows his daughter that problems can be solved without becoming the monster." The words hit harder than Jake expected. He thought about Lily, about what she'd learned from watching him handle this. Did he want to teach her that violence was the answer, or that there were harder ways requiring patience and faith? "You're right," the admission cost him something. "I don't like it, but you're right." "You don't have to like it, you just have to do it." They sat while darkness settled outside. Eventually, Emma stood, gathering her things. "Go home to Lily. Show her that everything's okay. That's the protection she needs right now." After Emma left, Jake drove home through streets he'd known his entire life. Inside the house, he found Lily curled on the couch despite bedtime having passed, waiting. Did bad people hurt the garage? There was no point lying. "Yeah, kiddo, some people broke windows and spray-painted walls." "Why?" "Because they're scared. When good things happen and they're not part of it, some people get angry instead of happy." Lily processed this with 9-year-old seriousness. Are you going to find them and make them stop? I'm going to let the police handle it. That's what police are for. But you could find them. The observation was more perceptive than he'd given her credit for. He sat down beside her, choosing his words carefully. I could, but that's not who I am anymore. I'm your dad and I run a garage, and I trust that doing the right thing will work out even when it's hard. Miss Cross thinks that too. She told me that doing right things is harder than doing easy things, but that's what makes them worth doing. Jake felt something warm bloom in his chest. When did she tell you that? When she was teaching me about engineering. She said lots of people told her she couldn't build her company because she was different, but she did it anyway because it was the right thing. Miss Cross is pretty smart. She is. Lily yawned. Dad, are we going to be okay? Yeah, kiddo, we're going to be okay. He carried her to bed, tucked her in with the worn stuffed rabbit that had been her mother, and stood in the doorway watching her fall asleep with the easy trust of children who believed their parents could fix anything. The next morning brought news that cut deeper than broken windows. Leo called at 7 a.m. You need to see this. The Jackson County Chamber of Commerce had sent formal letters to both Morrison's Auto Repair and Cross Technologies, CC'd to the mayor and county council. The language was bureaucratic, but the message was clear. Concerns had been raised about unfair business practices, specifically regarding corporate subsidies allowing predatory pricing. An emergency meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Jake read the letter twice, blood pressure spiking. This is Holly's. Leo nodded grimly. Using political pressure when vandalism didn't work. He's got friends on the chamber board. We're not undercutting anyone. We charge fair prices. Truth doesn't matter if he can make the lie sound better. Emma arrived an hour later, her own copy in hand and fury radiating from controlled movements. She dressed for war, charcoal suit, heels that added 3 inches, hair pulled back severe. This is retaliation. Can he actually shut us down? Not legally, but he can make our lives difficult enough that customers get nervous. Suppliers question whether we'll be around. Death by 1,000 cuts. So what do? We go to the meeting, and we make it very clear that we're not going anywhere. Tuesday arrived wrapped in freezing rain. The Chamber of Commerce met in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and old furniture polish. Garrett Hollies sat at the head of the table like he owned it, flanked by 3 board members who looked uncomfortable. Emma and Jake entered together. The chamber president, a nervous woman named Margaret Chen, started the proceedings. Thank you for coming. This is just an informal discussion about business practices. Let's skip the pleasantries. Emma's voice cut through pretense like a scalpel. Mr. Hollies has made accusations. I'd like to hear them stated clearly. Hollies leaned back with confidence. It's quite simple. Morrison's Auto Repair is pricing services below sustainable market rates. Obviously, they're being subsidized by Cross Technologies, which means they can afford to undercut local businesses. That's predatory practice. Our prices are competitive but not unsustainable. Jake kept his voice level. We charge what's fair. If that's lower than what you charge, maybe examine your own pricing. Hollies' smile turned sharp. Easy to say when you don't worry about profit. Cross Technologies can afford to run your operation at a loss for years to eliminate competition. Emma set her tablet on the table with a deliberate click. Mr. Hollies, let me be very clear. First, Morrison's Auto Repair is not operating at a loss. It's profitable because it offers quality service at fair prices. Second, our pricing is based on actual cost analysis, not market manipulation. And third, suggesting that competition is predatory just because you're losing market share is not a legal argument. It's a temper tantrum. The room went quiet. Margaret looked like she wanted to disappear. The other board members found their notepads fascinating. Now listen here, Holly started. No, you listen. Emma didn't raise her voice, but something in her tone made everyone freeze. I've reviewed the business filings for Holly's Premier Motors. Your overhead is bloated, your efficiency metrics are poor, and you've been coasting on reputation for 5 years. The reason you're losing customers isn't unfair practices. It's because you've been overcharging for mediocre work, and people finally have better options. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. Your business is incorporated, which means financial statements are public record. Emma swiped through her tablet, displaying charts. Your labor costs are 30% higher than industry standard. Your parts markup is excessive. Your customer retention has been declining since 2019. Those are your problems, Mr. Hollies, not us. Margaret looked horrified. The other members studied their notepads. Hollies had gone red-faced. This is ridiculous. He stood abruptly, chair scraping. I came here in good faith. You came here to use political pressure to eliminate a competitor you can't beat legitimately. Emma didn't raise her voice. And I'm here to tell you that won't work. Morrison's Auto Repair operates within all legal and ethical guidelines. We pay taxes, treat employees well, serve customers honestly. If you have actual evidence of wrongdoing, present it. Otherwise, this conversation is over. She stood, gathering her things with finality. Miss Chen, if Mr. Hollies wishes to file a formal complaint, he's welcome to do so through proper channels. But I won't participate in intimidation sessions disguised as dialogue. They walked out together. Once outside, Jake let out a breath he'd been holding. Holy hell, did that actually just happen? It did. Emma allowed herself a small smile, and it went exactly as I expected. You destroyed him professionally, with charts. He tried to use political connections to bully us. I simply reminded him that money talks louder than golf course friendships. She paused beside her SUV. This won't be the last time someone tries this. Success attracts jealousy. You need to be prepared. I'm not built for this. The management I can handle, but the politics. Then it's good we're partners. You handle operations and people. I'll handle the sharks. Over the next week, Emma put together a plan that was equal parts brilliant and ruthless. Cross Technologies launched a county-wide customer satisfaction survey, ostensibly to assess automotive service quality across all providers. The survey asked detailed questions about pricing, service quality, transparency, customer experience. Results would be published in the local newspaper. Hollies would see it coming but couldn't stop it without looking guilty. And the results would speak for themselves. It's not enough to survive his attacks, Emma explained over coffee in Jake's office. We need to make him irrelevant, make our success so visible and his tactics so transparent that he can't operate in the shadows anymore. You're starting to sound ruthless. I am ruthless. I just usually direct it at larger targets. Hollies has the misfortune of catching a hammer's attention. The survey results came back exactly as predicted. Morrison's Auto Repair scored highest in customer satisfaction, pricing transparency, quality of work, and overall experience. Hollies Premier Motors ranked near the bottom, customers citing overpricing, condescending staff, pressure for unnecessary work. The newspaper ran a front-page story. New survey reveals automotive service quality gaps. Within a week, Hollies' appointment schedule had visible holes. Within 2 weeks, he'd lost a major county fleet maintenance contract. Within a month, his employees were updating their resumes. Jake watched it happen with mixed feelings. Victory tasted less sweet when it meant watching someone else's livelihood crumble. Karma's a lovely thing. Leo stood beside him, watching a former Hollies customer pull into their bay. He spent 20 years grinding down anyone who challenged him. About time someone ground back. Still feels wrong somehow. That's because you're a good man. Leo clapped his shoulder. But being good doesn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes the most moral thing is showing bullies that their tactics won't work anymore. 3 months after the grand opening, Morrison's auto repair was thriving. Appointment books were full 3 weeks out. Mechanics were working overtime. 2 more veterans had been hired, along with a young woman fresh from trade school who had more natural talent than most mechanics developed in decades. Jake walked through the garage one evening after everyone had gone home. 8 bays that had been 3, equipment gleaming with maintenance, a waiting area designed for dignity, a team that treated each other like family. His father had Bill. Something good here. Jake, Emma, and Leo had made it better. And in doing so, they'd proven that broken things could become whole, that second chances were real, that standing up when no one else would could change everything. He found Emma in the office, reviewing next quarter's projections. She looked up when he entered. Good day. Solid day. We're ahead of projections by 15%. I've been thinking, Jake leaned against the desk, about expansion. Already, we just stabilized this location. Not here, other places. Towns like Jackson County that need investment. People with talent who just need someone to believe in them. Emma's eyes lit up with the particular gleam that meant she was already seeing possibilities. You want to replicate the model. I want to give other people what you gave me, the chance to be more than circumstances allow. It would take significant capital, years of work, no guarantee every location would succeed. But some would, and those would matter. Emma smiled, genuine warmth breaking through professional consideration. You've changed since that morning in the diner. We both have. You taught me that accepting help isn't weakness. Maybe I taught you that taking risks on people is worth it. Fair trade. Jake extended his hand across the desk. Emma shook it. Firm grip, partners in the truest sense. Not just business associates, but people who'd seen each other at their worst and decided that building something together was worth whatever came next. They worked until midnight, sketching expansion plans and arguing good-naturedly about timelines. When they finally locked up, Jake felt genuine excitement about tomorrow, about what could be built, about who they could help become more than they'd imagined possible. The garage lights went dark behind them, but the security cameras stayed active. Sensors waiting, not because they expected more attacks. Holly's had gone quiet, his business struggling, but because some lessons stay learned. You protect what matters. You plan for threats. You build systems that work even when you're not watching. Jake stood in the parking lot, snow beginning to fall in the sodium vapor lights. His phone buzzed, Lily texting good night. 3 heart emojis and a reminder that she'd left her chemistry set in his truck. He smiled, typed back, "Love you too, kiddo. See you at breakfast." Across town, Emma sat in her apartment, Lily's crayon drawing still pinned to her refrigerator beside architectural plans and her first product prototype. 3 different versions of building something from nothing. Tomorrow, she'd present the expansion proposal to her board. They'd question her judgment, demand justification, probably think she'd lost perspective. Let them. She built an empire from a hospital bed. Jake had rebuilt a legacy from foreclosure. Together, they'd proven that the strongest foundation wasn't steel or capital. It was people willing to bet on each other when nobody else would. The snow fell harder now, blanketing Jackson County in white that made everything look clean and possible. And somewhere in the darkness, a garage stood ready for morning. Mechanics would arrive. Customers would trust them with their vehicles and their problems. Leo would make terrible coffee and tell stories he'd told for 40 years. Ordinary work, honest work, the kind that changed lives. Before you go, I've got a question for you. Have you ever had a moment where a complete stranger stepped in to defend you when no one else would? Or maybe you were that stranger for someone else? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit you the way it hit me, you're going to want to hear about what happened next. Let's just say that Garrett Hollies didn't go away quietly, and what Emma and Jake did next changed their town forever. I'll tell you that story next time. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Hit that bell too, because trust me, the best part is coming. I'll see you in the next one.